Hello everyone, welcome to the first episode of what I'm calling Off the Cuff. It's essentially going to be a series of videos I'm going to make. I don't know how long, what for. Topics are going to vary, but basically I want to talk about various topics with very little research, which, typically I like to know my shit before I start talking. But I can't be relying on that kind of thing to talk about these things, because what's happening is that I'll think, that's a great thing to talk about. I won't actually, I won't have the time to research it. Too busy working, working on other side projects. So I've got way too much going on, and so I just don't get around to it. And by the time I actually read up anything on it, it's gone. It's over. So I want to do this whole series so I can sort of talk about some of the stuff that I've been thinking about, just from a matter of opinion. So as my disclaimer right now, it's opinion for the most part. If there are facts, I can back them up. If you disagree with me, then say so, because honestly, there's nothing wrong with a disagreement. It helps to make our points stronger. If you're right, then go ahead, prove it. Prove me wrong. Or, what's the word? Change my mind. Okay. So, I've got a few topics I want to talk about today. And we'll just be going through it. I'll probably just kind of roughly skim them. The first thing is about some weird hypocritical assumptions I've seen in society, here in the UK anyway. No, the second little thing was about some cultural differences that a lot of people notice but no one talks about. Not enough people talk about, maybe. And another thing was the cultural foundations of our society and just how they're being treated. The fourth thing was about some various charities and donation-based organizations that I have some beef with. And the fifth thing was about the future of technology. It's some people have very pessimistic views about it, and I just want to kind of chat about those, offer a different point of view. And the last little thing I want to talk about is about music, political music, but we'll get to all that later. So, to start with, these the sort of hypocritical assumptions I've been seeing in society lately. It all just boils down. It all starts with something I've noticed. It's November 2018 right now, and Gerard Batten has just appointed Tommy Robinson to be his advisor on rape gangs and prison reformation. Now, I don't really have a problem with that if, Batten is his choice. It's not to do with the party of UKIP. So, it's really his decision. Now, what I'm trying to address here is, a lot of people say that Tommy Robinson is racist. Now, I've watched a lot of his videos. I've never seen him actually say anything particularly racist. He has said many anti-religious things towards Islam, but Islam is not a race, so I can't really say that's racist. But my real issue has been with the response from UKIP. A lot of UKIP members, in response to Tommy Robinson being appointed, or just their opinion towards Tommy Robinson. Now, my reason for having a little kind of issue there is these members of UKIP believe that Tommy Robinson is racist. Now, as I say, there's not really much to prove that or say that, but I just find it kind of ironic. When I mention UKIP to people, they say, oh yeah, it's a party of racists, or oh yeah, they got racist policies, and it's usually just along the lines of UKIP is racist. And I find that really funny, because I don't consider UKIP to be racist, because I've kind of read their manifesto. I've read what they're all about. They've not really said anything racist, and I don't agree with all their policies, but I wouldn't say that UKIP's racist. But I find it really funny because the media and a lot of people just assume that UKIP is racist because they've heard that. And they just keep proliferating this point of view that UKIP is racist. So these members of UKIP have had this experience of having the media and having most of the public portray them as racist. And then they hear about Tom Robinson, they go, oh yeah, he's racist. And I was like, well, where'd you hear that? Oh, the media. What? Do they not realize the complete hypocriticism? Because they're a part of a party that is often portrayed as racist, and I just don't see... It's like this weird way that people approach words. It's like, they focused on UKIP, they've decided to join UKIP, and realizing UKIP is not what everyone has portrayed it to be, has not produced some sort of, wait a second, maybe everything else I assumed might also be wrong. Maybe not everything, but a lot of things around media and what they're hearing on the news. And I just find it quite hilarious that they choose to ignore a lot of the facts around Tommy Robinson, but they're happy to acknowledge the facts around UKIP. And it's peculiarly ironic and hypocritical. And I think that they really, I've really kind of found that irritating because, surely if you're going to start accusing someone of being a racist when you've been accused of being a racist, or you would be accused of being a racist, would you not take a second to just maybe not jump to a conclusion, just consider it on its merits? Like, if you never had to deal with Tommy Robinson, you never have to think about it. Assumptions are kind of alright because you're not actually engaging in it. But once something becomes a central part of what you believe in and what you think, surely you should take that moment to consider the facts. I'll give you an example, right? So I do a lot of web development, and as a web developer, I don't really have to think about, let's say, the language of Ruby, which I'm not a fan of, but the Ruby language is of no concern to me. There's a lot of weird drama that goes on there, which I'll talk about in another video, so I really want to address this. But I don't use Ruby. When I build applications on websites, I don't use Ruby. So everything that goes on around Ruby, I can just jump to the conclusions I want to. And if I learn Ruby, then those assumptions aren't going to work most likely. So I'm going to have to rethink it. I'm going to have to do the research. I'm going to have to look up stuff. And I just find it so funny that when someone decides they're going to actually have a strong opinion on something, they don't first make sure that opinion has some ground. And it's just ridiculous, really. Now, I'm not going to talk too much on that, really, because I really just have those initial point of views. There's just this weird hypocriticism that even in a party like UKIP, they will jump to the same assumptions that everyone else has jumped to about them. Now, the second little thing I wanted to talk about is the cultural differences, in our society. Now, this isn't something I don't have that many opinions on it. I have noticed many things over my life here in the UK, and I find that there's quite a lot of differences between different cultures, and a lot of people don't mention it, but when they do, they get called racist. So I'll provide an example. Now, in a lot of Eastern countries, to my this is opinion, and I am making an assumption here based on what I have heard. But to my knowledge, in a lot of Eastern countries, let's say India, they have a culture of focusing and caring mainly or purely on your family and yourself. People in the street are not your concern. For the most part, anyway. Here in the UK, and likely due to the strong Christian history, it takes a different approach. You're often expected to care for random strangers, to do good deeds to others. Now, you can see the strengths of both of these in their own right. A lot of Indian families they're able to raise money as a family very quickly because they all rely on each other and they're all expected to help one another, which is great and it works. And then a lot of Christian households, random people who are really suffering can get help because random strangers will do good deeds, typically anyway. Now, the problem with what's going on here in the UK is, and in a few other countries, is that these cultural differences are colliding. So I saw a post online, this guy was saying that he's noticed that certain races don't tip as often. And I just commented on that. I just pointed out, it's likely a cultural difference. because cultural differences change what you focus on. They change what is good and what is bad in your society. And so if something is considered good, then you will do that thing. So if it's good to provide for your family, you'll focus on that. Another perfect example is spending money. So a lot of British culture, and likely a few other countries, you're typically expected, you're going to find a house, and how the way you display your wealth is usually a mixture of where you live, and there's little things like how you speak, what you eat, and how you spend your time, and who you associate with. Now, I grew up in South Africa, and I always noticed that a lot of Africans there will have, let's say, the fanciest BMW. And they'll have the latest iPhone. And they will park this amazing BMW car next to their metal shack. Because in their culture, when you display your wealth, it is through the items you use. So they will park next to, when they're going to a club or they're going out in the town, people will see them in their fancy BMW with their nice iPhone, and they'll likely dress sharp as well, a nice suit. Because at the end of the day, for them, their home is not the main focus for them. So there's just that little difference there. And you even see it when African people come to the UK. And you'll have noticed it with some Indian cultures as well, their houses will be big and flashy. They'll pave the whole front of the house, have like 4 or 5 BMWs and Mercedes parked outside, and that's likely a cultural thing. They're displaying their wealth to the neighborhood, to the world, and so it's not bad. It's just a difference. It's an interesting difference that happens in a culture. And I find it gets ignored a lot because it's not always good. There's a lot of things that can be good about it. But an example of where it's not good is like this person who's posted. It's likely in the US because tipping is not really a British thing as far as I'm aware anyway. Either that or I've been doing something wrong all these times. But this person said that they've noticed that certain races don't tip as well. So that's actually affecting their income. And again, I think tipping is, I've got my own personal opinions. I don't think it's that good. I think, you should be paying someone a wage that actually allows them to live on the job and not expect donations, really, from random people. So I think there's a weird sort of, and it's likely due to the whole, you're racist insult. There's a lot of people just ignore it. They don't talk about it. Anyway, so moving on. This one's more something I'm not too learned. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. That I'm not too well taught on cultural foundations, but I've done a lot of reading of various books and some of the history of the UK and a lot of European countries and the US. And there is some principles that our society is founded on. They're strong principles. They should be anyway. We have the idea of innocent until proven guilty. We have the idea of freedom of expression, the freedom to speak to people, and so long as, this depends on who you talk to, but typically people say so long as you're not inciting violence directly or, inciting chaos through yelling fire in a theatre. Now, I've got my own personal opinions on that, and I think that saying it's all free unless does start to, it's easy to add to an existing condition than to add conditions that have never existed. Okay, so a lot of these cultural foundations are being broken down. It really annoys me. You've got, so let's go with the innocent until proven guilty. And another, actually, one that ties onto that, freedom of association. a lot of what's happened lately is you had people who, like, say you talk to a member of UKIP, or you go share a stage with a member of UKIP. People say, "Oh, see, they shared a stage with that member of UKIP, they're racist." But what if you watch this talk that they're having, where they're sharing a stage, and they're arguing? Now, if you're arguing with someone, do you really share their views? Or maybe you share a few, but it does depend on what you're arguing about. I hang out with many people of different political backgrounds, and I don't share my political views with everyone, because I know that some people are not they're not too accepting, because they think that they believe everything they've heard on the news, and therefore they're quick to jump to an assumption. And I find it much easier to let people get to know me before I share anything, because then they know who I am, and not how my views. They don't let my views decide who I am, because they already know who I am. So there's a breaking of cultural foundations, really, because we've got people who now, they will see you do something, they'll see you talk to someone, and they will assume that that decides your views, which is therefore guilt by association. You're not okay to associate with those people. And if you do associate with people, then the presumption of innocence is also broken down, and people will assume that you are guilty of whatever actions the other person has espoused. And then the other little funny thing there is this weird sort of thing where they'll get angry that you didn't challenge the person. So an example would be various people who do interviews with Jordan Peterson, or even maybe Theresa May more recently. Another guy is Dave Rubin, who's an interviewer, and you'll see these people. They'll get into these interviewers. They'll get criticized by people online, saying, you didn't challenge them on their transphobic point of view. Or you didn't challenge them on their views on the IQ differences in males and females. And, the interviewer's job is not always to debate. They're not there to debate. There's room for debate, and there's room to criticize sometimes. But most of the time, an interview is to explore something the person has said, not criticize it, though interviewers more recently, by and large, have taken on the point of view, or have taken on the role of activist to a degree as well. Okay, so I'm going to move on, because I'm kind of stuck on that one for a bit longer than I intended. Now, this next few are not ones that most people talk about. At least I haven't heard many people talk about it. Maybe it's based on who I listen to. So I call these groups goal-oriented organizations. Now, when I say goal-oriented organizations, what I'm referring to is groups who have set a goal that has an end. So if you're a group advocating free speech and protection of free speech, you're likely going to be doing that forever. But when you have groups who are trying to remove, let's say, abolish gender differences. Another example would be, more like the ones I'm actually wanting to focus on, would be groups who seek an end to cancer. They want to find a cure for cancer, or groups who want to end poverty in third world countries. Now, here's a little problem you run into when you run one of these groups. What happens when you do it? What happens when you reach your goal? Because human nature doesn't like seeing an end to your purpose. You have people who go through university for a fixed time, and that's the thing, is it's got a fixed time from the start, and when they finish university for the longest length that they can be there for their course, they're hit with two decisions, both rooted in the same sort of thought. And that thought is, what now? I have no doubt that many people who get into school, get into college, get into universities, they're hit with this sort of pause. A lot of people anyway, are hit with this pause where they've not decided what they're going to do next. And for a moment, they lose their purpose. But the groups researching the cure for cancer and seeking to bring an end to poverty, they don't have a fixed term. They're not saying, yes, we're going to end poverty in 3 years. We've got this plan. It's definitely going to finish then. And at the end of those 3 years, we're going to destroy our group and end. But they haven't finished. And if you look over the last, the amount of money that goes towards helping third world countries, as in the amount of money that actually gets donated, not the amount of money that actually makes it to those countries, because that's another little thing I've noticed is quite different. And please correct me if I am wrong, but not a lot of the money that gets donated to these companies makes it to their cause. A lot of money goes towards running their group and promoting the group, advertising, events. And all these events and promotion are what? To raise more money. So you're stuck with a group that's spending money to raise money, to spend money. All the while going, here's a little bit, a few single percentage points of our donations. Why don't you get yourself something a little nice, And the problem with that, of course, is that there is no end. It doesn't really end because they depend on the remaining third world countries to exist. There's another weird little hypocriticism there, especially with the groups trying to help the poor people, is you end up with this annoying hypocriticism. Well, I don't know, hypocriticism might not be the right word, actually. I'll just state what it is. So, a lot of people that I have heard talk about these charities, they're doing it to feel like they're making a difference. Human beings are quite selfish, whether or not they acknowledge it to themselves. And the people who are right, let's say, in their selfishness, will realize they're selfish and acknowledge it and work with it. Or maybe work against it, knowingly. But there are a lot of people who are, they're helping the poor people in Africa, and they feel really good, and they feel really like they are righteous. They are doing the right thing, and they are making the world a better place. And you can see this sort of hypocriticism when you look at how these same people have a very bad reaction to people who don't want help or don't need help. You end up with people who, it ends up being like a very bad symbiotic relationship. You've got people who, they want people to help. So therefore they want you to keep depending on them so they can keep helping you and feeling good about themselves. And at the same time, on the other hand, you've got people who aren't doing anything. They're just getting food, they're getting clothes, and they're getting everything they need, and they don't have to do anything. And they end up dependent. They end up just, suckling off the teat of the lovely, righteous organizations. And the problem with this is that means that they never grow. The same thing happens with welfare and benefits, is that you end up with, you're receiving money, and that money, you can't do, like a lot of times with welfare and benefits anyway, you can't do anything to get out of that rut. If you want to keep receiving money, you have to not make any of your own money, to a degree anyway. And so what do? You do nothing. You just keep receiving the money. And so you never get out of your poor, if you're in a third world country, your poor, starving status. And it's a horrible cycle. It's a horrible cycle. And frankly, I think that I'm going to do a whole video on this someday, because I find it absolutely despicable that there are these organizations that seek to bring an end to something that they don't have any incentive to bring an end to it. The only incentive they have, the incentives they have go against their human nature. Because they're going to get money, they feel good about themselves for getting that money, they'll feel good about themselves for helping the poor little person or giving money to the cause that actually isn't really getting anywhere. Because, and I think another third one is climate change. I think but I would direct you to, though I don't like him too much, Stefan Molyneux. He's done a lot of videos on climate change and how he changed his opinion on climate change. Because if you look at human nature, if you say to a guy, right, I've got here a red pill. I've got here a red M&M and a blue M&M. I'll give you $5 if you have the red M&M. Which one are you going to pick? Which one are you more likely to pick? Now, I know that's a horrible analogy, maybe, because you got two things there that there's no really difference if you pick one or the other. But you'd be surprised how much humans can rationalize doing the wrong thing. You only have to look at the Nazis and Second World War to know how well people can rationalize doing the wrong thing. You only have to look at slavery in America to look at how people can rationalize doing the wrong thing. You only have to look at the white genocide in Zimbabwe to look at how people can rationalize doing the wrong thing. If they tell themselves, no person does something thinking, I'm so evil, I'm doing such evil in this world, I'm going to be a horrible person. If you know of anyone who knows that what they're doing is evil and has no rationalization and happily does it, thinking that there's no justification for it, no righteous justification, then find that person for me, because humans have a hell of a way of rationalizing something that is absolutely despicable. Human history tells us that. Okay, we're going to move on to another little topic. A few people talk about this, but it's usually more of a pessimistic point of view. And that is the future of technology, the rise of artificial intelligence. There's a lot of people who talk about how it's going to take away jobs. It's going to be horrible. We're going to take away jobs and no one's going to be able to work. So, we need to fear this future. Now, there is a reason to fear AI, but there's no reason to fear your job being taken away. Because if we were to fear jobs being taken away, should we not have feared for the poor farmers working in the field when sprinkling systems and tractors and massive innovations that improved farming to the point where one person can farm what 100 people used to farm? There is a reason to be optimistic. The reason to be optimistic is that humanity finds a way. And the only reason we are required to work in our society is because our society requires us to work. That might sound like tautology, but really just think about it, okay? You work for two reasons typically. To provide food and money, and food and a shelter and just living, really. But there's a second reason. Because here in Britain, you can quite happily provide a lot of money, enough to live on maybe, through benefits. So why don't people go for that all the time? Well, there's two reasons. The one is greed, actually. People want to be prosperous. Having a bare basic amount of money that they can't even control is not suitable for them. And rightly so. You should be allowed to strive, to innovate, to create something, to work hard, to produce massive amounts of income for yourself, your family, your friends, whoever you want, really. But the second reason is actually a societal one, which is we tend to have a bad view of people who don't work. Maybe rightly so as well, because typically that means that the person is relying on the government. But there is no reason why technology cannot provide all the food, shelter, money, like food, water, everything to survive. Think about how that would free you up. You know that thing you wanted to do that you didn't have time to do because you were too busy working? Well, imagine you didn't have to work to live. Like these writers who take a year off from their job or something, like one of these sabbaticals or something, and they take the time to write their new book. And maybe they don't finish it, but imagine they didn't have to take time off. Imagine the people who don't want to work and just sit around all day could do so without any cost towards the rest of society. no increase in taxes to pay for the benefits. Imagine the people who don't want to work could just sit on their asses all day doing nothing. But the people who wanted to thrive and find something amazing to do with their life, some hobby, some innovation, some entrepreneurial activity, imagine they had all the time in the world to do that. Now, it's worth noting, like I said earlier with the goal-oriented organizations, people need a purpose. People need something to strive towards. A person without a purpose is that they do not do well. They can suffer depression. They will feel like their life is awful. And I know that's because sometimes I don't know what I want to do. I've got so many things I want to do, but I don't feel like doing any of them. I feel like I've got no point. There's no point to doing anything. And I sit there and I'm thinking, what am I supposed to do? And when I find something to do and I actually feel passionate about it, it is amazing. And it fills my life with this great rush of good spirit and optimistic points of views. Often unrealistically optimistic. I think I'm going to succeed amazingly, but that's beside the point. So there is no reason to fear the rise of technology. There are people who thought that the train would go too fast and suffocate people. There are people who thought mankind will never fly. There are people who thought that when the piano was invented, it would ruin music forever because it made it too easy. The same people who then criticize, well, not the same people literally, but the same kinds of people who now criticize electronic music because it's too easy. A computer can do it. Now, rise in technology has provided many boons for humankind in the past. Of course, not all technology is great for humans, but those are exceptions more often than not. Now on to the last little point here. I've gone on much longer than I intended. This last little thing is about political music. I don't have too much to say here, but I've noticed that there's a annoying, and I know most people have probably noticed this, it's an annoying contradiction in a lot of political music. Now, the names that come to my mind are three groups that I like. There are many more. The first is a group called Enter Shikari. They're a heavy metal band. I remember I got into them a few years back, and they have some really, really good music. Their production is amazing, and they combine metal and electronic in really, really awesome ways. The problem is that, they have this whole anti-establishment contrarian point of view. They're so controversial. They're opposing the government. Now, I do agree with their views on free speech to a degree. They do talk about censorship, and that's fair. But on Twitter and in some of their music, a lot of their points of views are pretty, they're not controversial at all. But they act like they are. They, no doubt they were pro-Remain, and they were treating everyone who wasn't pro-Remain like a moron. Because there's no bad effect to completely demonizing your opposition. It's one way to get them to your side, right? Make them feel so hated that they want to join you so they can be loved, right? Now, an even weirder little thing I noticed was there's another guy named Grandson. It's a weird name, but he makes good music. A lot of his political views are very, very in your face. Anti-Trump, anti-big business, anti-government. Definitely not hypocritical, given that his music is labeled under WMG, Warner Music Group. One of the biggest, most fucking annoying record labels in the world. It's Warner Music Group and Universal Music Group. Those two are complete twats living in a dinosaur era where record labels would make vinyls and sell them, and when you stole from them, you actually were stealing from them. You weren't just using their song in a bloody fucking YouTube video. So I would love to play Grandson's music, but I don't want to get a copyright flag from the big business that supports him. So that's massive, massive hypocriticism. People would say that's selling out. It probably is. I don't really accuse people of selling out because half the time I don't think they know. Because I'm pretty sure Grandson is signed with a company that is a subsidiary of WMG. But what's new? That they've got like thousands of subsidiaries. The last group is one. It's very much like Shikari. There is a group called Engine-Earz Experiment, and they do the same whole thing. They're all about anti-establishment, anti-government, and they do the same kind of thing with their views. They've got there's no facts behind their views. I'm tempted to kind of look at the lyrics and just point out the problems with them, but I think that would take much more time. And frankly, this video's gone on for longer than I've intended to. So yeah, I'm gonna actually just wrap it up. But I actually there's a lot more I can say on all those topics. So if you actually would like to hear more about any of those topics, comment below, because frankly, I think there's more I could say about it. I want to hear your opinion on it. If you think there's anything I said that was incorrect, please challenge me. Fight me, bro. So give me your opinion on any of those topics, if you agree, if you disagree. And if you want to hear more on any of them, please say so, because then I'll prioritize those, I suppose, because there's a lot more that can be said. If you want to hear me actually analyze the lyrics of some of these political music, political songs, then yeah, please do say so. And actually, if you know any political artists yourself that you think are either hypocritical or are right, then do send them comment, the name of the group, and yeah, I'd love to definitely do some more videos analyzing some political music. I'm going to do some research on some of those goal-oriented organizations, look at how the donations are actually spent, get the statistics on that, and look at how much good they've actually done in the past 2 decades or so. And I'll probably do a video as well on the future of technology. And I've got many other little things I want to talk about, mainly around some of the technology growth in coding, and also I want to look at some of the annoying things that have happened with short-sighted politics. A lot of politicians just being naive, to say the least, really. And I also want to talk about some interesting developments or some changes I noticed with some of the GIF supporting sites, Tenor and Giphy. I noticed some major problems with them, and there's a lot to be said that isn't being said about them. So that's everything. I'm not going to ask you to subscribe or whatever, because I find that stupid, but you watch. Someday in the future I'm going to say it and someone's going to point to this video. But right now, this is my first video, so I'm not going to say it because I don't expect you to. If you do comment below though, it's probably worth you subscribing, because if you suggest anything, you're only going to get an update if you post it to this channel. Speaking of which, it's worth checking out RSS feeds if you don't want YouTube controlling your YouTube subscription feed, because RSS feeds are not controlled by any algorithm. Let me check that out. Alright, that's all from me.